Welcome.
Thank you, Thomas. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. I've been on the site for, I don't know, God, gosh, I don't know how many years now. A while, and I can't even remember how I learned about the site, to be honest. But first, I want to give a quick introduction, and then we can get right into the interview, and then we can go from there.
Sounds good.
Kind of the purpose of this interview is to give the viewers a fly on the wall type of perspective in a conversation between you and I about high-end audio and specifically around the objective measurements in high-end audio and have a conversation about that. So I hope that the viewers find value in it, and I appreciate the viewers joining us. So I'll go ahead and introduce Amir. I have the pleasure today to interview Amir, have a conversation with him. Now, I'm going to try to say your last name. I know I'm going to butcher it, but
that's okay.
Majid Amir.
Great.
Was that close?
It is very close. It's long and scary, but it's pronounced the way it's written. But everybody calls me Amir, which was my alias at Microsoft. So feel free to call me Amir or Amir. Either one is fine.
Gotcha. I always like to try. That's your family name. I like to try. So you're the founder of AudioScienceReview. Amir's the founder of AudioScienceReview. That is a science and engineering website. It's a discussion forum dedicated to audio. There, the cornerstone of the site is reviews on hardware products, which Amir churns out seemingly daily, from speakers to electronics to headphones, and which is how I met him, virtually. So Amir has a degree in electrical engineering. And he's worked for companies, small, large, the most well-known of those being Microsoft and Sony. He's worked hands-on on both hardware and software. For those people who remember, he was a Unix programmer back in the day. He managed software development teams, for a number of decades now. So it's safe to say that he's been in audio and an electronic hobbyist, and of course an audiophile for many decades now. So with that, I'm happy to introduce Amir. Hello, welcome to High on Hi-Fi.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. I mean, tell the people a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got here.
There's a Forrest Gump movie. He says he doesn't remember being born, but he remembers the first time he got a box of chocolate. I don't remember why or how I got into audio, but sometime when I was, 10 or 11 years old, my older brother and I just all of a sudden woke up one day, decided that we wanted some kind of hi-fi system at home. And that whole hobby grew from there. And at the same time, I grew up with electronics. My oldest brother, is an electrical engineer, and he always tinkered with building stuff at home. And we were always fascinated with what he was building, and he taught us electronics. So naturally, when I went to school, wanted to get a degree in electrical engineering. And ironically, most of what I know about electronics, I learned from my brother and doing this stuff. Than actually at school, although school was helpful too. Anyway, I got my degree, but the first job that I got was actually programming on Unix operating system, and I worked on the core kernel or the guts of the operating system for a number of years, and then I went to join Sony, worked there for about 5 years on the computer side, but of course got exposed to the culture there on the audio side and electronics also. Did a few startups. One of them was doing video on the internet when we still had dial-up modems. So the concept of a video on the internet was just, people would laugh at you. They're like, I can barely type text fast enough and you want to pass video. But very, very clever people from Stanford were working there. And we managed to get a little postage stamp video that would change the frame every 2 or 3 seconds, and there was audio. And we got that, developed it, and then we went looking for funding. And one of the letters we sent went to Microsoft, and Microsoft said, we'll go and acquire you and come on over. So this was in 97.
Wow. Yeah.
So we were living in California, packed up our bags, came up here, and the job was in streaming video on the web. And I started with one person reporting to me. And when I left the company about 10 years later, it was 1,000 people.
Wow.
So it grew. I took our technology that we developed on Windows, wanted it to also work in consumer electronics. I just lost you on video. Oh, there we go. You're back.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got, so I got exposed to a lot of that. I built a signal processing team. So dealt a lot with psychoacoustics, what makes great audio, became a trained listener. So I would do all the critical listening tests for the team when we develop a new audio algorithms for compression or surround processing.
Oh, wow.
I was sort of the golden ear guy, not the classic definition of golden ear that audiophiles use, but truly being able to hear things that without training you couldn't hear.
Sure.
And it took a lot to get trained. It took about 6 months of training my ears to the point where I could hear extremely small artifacts that day one I could not hear. I remember the first day I played 128K MP3 against original. And after being audiophile for 30 years, I was just flabbergasted that it sounded so good. And I was like, oh, this should be a walk in the park to tell the difference. Like, whoa, wait a second. It's not so easy. But of course, at the end of a trip, you can give me, you know, near lossless, and I can still find those artifacts and find those problems. You blacked out again, Thomas.
Yeah, I'm trying to manage this. I'm not sure why it's blacking out, but
I think it's probably power saving and shutting off the camera.
Well, oddly enough, I turned that function off, but
we did. I decided to come back on.
You know, I'm going to do this.
Oh, there we go.
I'm going to do this. This one.
This is computer technology. It works. The other one
it works.
Camera technology.
This is going to have to work.
You look fine anyway. You look fine. Just a wider shot. Anyway, I left Microsoft and did a startup that we sold to major companies. And that sort of was my last professional gig.
Okay.
And didn't want to go back to work, didn't want to do 9-to-5 jobs. And started a forum with somebody else and didn't work out. And I decided to start my own forum. And I thought, well, what should the forum be? And I remembered that I've got all these papers that I read, and they're all behind paywalls. Audio Engineering Society, Acoustic Society of America, wonderful papers, but you can't get access to them. And even if you could, they're hard to understand because they're written for their peers. They're not written for the average person who doesn't have the same background. So I thought I'd start a forum.
Technical things.
Very, very technical. I mean, they don't take the time to explain to you what the underlying math is or the previous papers and so forth.
They're expecting you to have that knowledge already.
Exactly. It's a professional forum. It's not for end users. Yeah. So I thought I'd start a forum and I just summarize these papers and maybe 10 people show up and we'll just discuss them. Well, a number of people that knew me from other forums came over. And while I did some of those papers, it became the normal, you know, just bickering people over, you know, tube sound versus transistor and subjective versus objectivist. The forum grew a little bit, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be. And then one day somebody asked, hey, Amir, what do you think of these $99 DACs? And I said, I don't know. The objective is all piled in and said, they're all perfect. They're all going to sound the same. And then subjectivist said, well, you got to listen to them and what have you. I said, wait a second. I have this audio precision analyzer, $28,000 analyzer. It's 20 years old. It's been sitting there from out of the project. And I said, I'll fire this up and buy a few of these DACs and test them. So I went and bought a whole bunch of them, 5 or 6 from Amazon, plugged them in, and to my surprise, they weren't the same. Some of them had serious issues. And then one of them actually played really great, which was actually a product from a company called Topping, which I'd never heard of, the D30. And I was like, wow, it's no-name Chinese company. The thing works. And I look at the brochure, it actually has audio precision graphs in it. I said, whoa, no wonder it works. They tested it and they knew what problems were. So I did that. Next thing you know, more requests. Hey, how about this? How about this? I buy a few $1,000s worth of stuff. And I'm like, this is not going to scale. Me constantly buying everything. Right. And then anything that didn't review well, nobody wanted to buy from me. So I was the last owner.
Of course, yeah, that makes sense.
And then this amazing thing happened where one person offered, hey, you want to test this thing if I send it to you? I'm like, wow, he's going to trust me with this equipment? And the next person. Next thing I know, about 70, 80% of what I was testing was what people were sending in. So first I focused on DACs and then headphone amplifiers, sort of desktop products, which happens to be the largest market there is for electronics for audio anyway. That really grew, put us on a map. Of course, people elsewhere all got bent out of shape. I'd measure some products and I say that. People go nuts. Who are you? What the hell do you know? Just a Joe blogger trying to measure. Yeah, it's like, what do you know? And rightly, they didn't know who I was. I was not a famous person in the industry. But gradually that subsided and the whole machinery just got more serious. Then somebody, I expanded into amplifiers, larger devices, which I didn't want to. They're pain in the neck to lug around and ship.
Sure.
But had to be done, audio video receivers. And then one of the longtime members he said, you know, we're doing all these tests on the stuff that matters the least, the electronics, but we're not testing the stuff that matters the most, and they vary, which is the speakers and headphones.
Yeah, they're the highest distortion components in your system next to your
They are, exactly. And no debate about it.
Yeah.
So I was taken back by that comment, and it just froze me in my tracks. In the past, I was like, you got to be crazy to deal with speakers, to go and buy all these things or deal with these huge boxes and everything. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Sure.
But in the back of my mind, I remember this company called KLIPPEL had this analyzer that they had built, which was to, instead of having an anechoic chamber where it's a quiet, reflection-free room to measure speakers, this thing is a robotic scanner. You put the speaker on a stand and a microphone scans it in 2 cylinders. Wow. And using advanced math is able to separate the reflections in the room and get rid of them. So you get a sound as if you've measured it in a $1 million anechoic chamber.
Wow, yeah.
So I contacted the company, said, how much is it? And they were like, oh, are you a company? I'm like, no, I'm not a company. They're like, really? You want to buy this box? They're like, yeah. They came back, they said, well, here's a nice quote for you, $109,000 or something it was. I was like, wow. What? $109,000? I said, look, let me fess up. This is just for me. I'm a retired guy from technology. I'm trying to do this as a service to the industry. I can't, I'm not asking you to give me anything for free, but this kind of number is just, I'm not, a big company like Microsoft or Apple or Samsung or whoever to buy these things out of, corporate budget.
More than you can buy out there.
Right. So I didn't think nothing of it. And I was speaking to the US distributor. Next thing I know, I get a letter from Mr. KLIPPEL himself, Dr. Wolfgang KLIPPEL, saying, Amir, how wonderful it is that you're doing this. I wish I could retire and do what you're doing. I'll have my guys work with you and see if we can get you a package.
Wow.
Make a long story short, it still was not cheap. I'm talking about you could buy an expensive luxury SUV or you could buy this system after discount. But I got to a point where I was like, I've got to do it. I'm a kind of guy, I'm like, if I'm going to solve this puzzle of people having good sound in their rooms, I've got to solve this puzzle. So put in the order a year and 4 months ago. And the system came and it comes in pieces. So it took me 2 or 3 days to assemble it, a few more days to get it going. And I started doing speaker testing. And of course, the first 3 months, everybody said, no way the system works. All your measurements must be wrong. The same thing with electronics. Repeat it again. What do you know about speakers, right? And everything. But got through that. And then I thought about it and I was like, I've got this massive investment. I've got $100,000 in on this thing. I better use this equipment. I can't just do one speaker test and then wait 2 months to do another one. Yeah. To amortize it, I got to use this thing. Right. So I decided to do a review 1 a day almost. Wow. And I would do one speaker one, then one electronic, one speaker one electronic. Okay. Yeah. So last year I did 270 electronic reviews and I did 120 speaker reviews and about 10 headphones. So it's amazing on all fronts. It's both me doing it, but also the readership of the forum, people sending them to me, people buying stuff, shipping them to me, I'm testing and sending it back. It's just been a great community effort, but it's also been like turning this crank, saying we got to make a difference. If you're thinking about buying an audio product, I want to make it easier for you to get trustworthy data. And that's really what it's about. You can go get a review on anything anywhere, but can you trust it? How do you know this guy says the speaker sounds good or bad? Is he right?
Yeah.
How do you know? You know, I take a speaker, I measure it, then I listen to it, and I correlate the two. So there's high likelihood of what I'm saying is going to be correct. Not guaranteed. You know, we're not in guarantee business, but doing that. And then craziness continued 3 months ago, 4 months ago. Oh, actually, it was 5, 6 months ago, where I said, "Well, I haven't done a headphone."
Hold on one second. Let me pull. I'm gonna pull my headphones on because I think we might be getting some feedback here.
All right, no problem.
Speakers through the microphone. Let me just.
It sounds good to me, but yeah, the headphones.
Well, I want to make sure that people when I'm recording it, they're not hearing
right.
The whatchamacallit. Hold on one second.
No problem.
Okay. Okay, go ahead and talk.
So
okay,
I went ahead and you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. So a few months ago, I decided to buy the headphone measurement rig also. That's $15,000. So compared to the speaker thing, it's cheap. But if you think about it, you know, $15,000 is still a heck of a lot of money.
It is. Yeah.
So I've started doing headphone testing, and the same grief has already started of, oh, what do you know about headphones? Who's this guy? Or should we believe it? But luckily, I know that it'll pass.
Yeah.
So my goal is that to document electronics or a piece of audio you want to buy in an objective manner and, if needed, subjective manner, so that you're not buying blind. You know, in this day and age, the stores have all closed up anyway, outside of the COVID even, and the business model of having a retail shop is falling apart. So how are you going to get good data?
Yeah.
You know, measure it and do it logically and reliably.
It's really interesting that, you know, kind of citizen electronic engineers are filling in where you had to go to your dealer before to sit and listen. And so the dynamic has really changed in that. And, you know, some people lament that, and I can understand, you know, you have a personal relationship with your dealer and, you know, they're human, you know, you don't know people on the forums necessarily, but so it's going to be an interesting, you know, kind of new world that we're in to see how that all plays out, and if there is a space for, you know, what you do and how what will come out of that in the future. You know, having some kind of dealer support or having some kind of tangible thing that you can that's local that you can actually, because I think a lot of being an audiophile is a community thing. You know, it's a community part more than just the digital community part. You know.
Right. Well, we also have to influence manufacturers. I mean, they give you no useful information. Yeah. You go get a speaker. What is the spec? It says it's 4 ohm. First of all, that's a lie because impedance changes with frequency. Rarely are they give you efficiency, sensitivity. That's almost always wrong too. Yeah. And then they give you some bogus frequency response numbers, 40 to 20 kilohertz plus about its 3 dB. It's like
really smooth, crazily smooth graph.
Then they go talk about, they don't even give you graphs. Some of them give you graphs, but if they do, they'll smooth them out. So we've got to influence them to provide good data. Yeah. And the other thing, my goal is to separate the people who know what they're doing and the people who don't know what they're doing. It's not hard to get an audio business. Speakers, certainly, you go a bunch of speakers and drivers and put them together. Yeah. And electronics the same way. You can get people manufacturing things for you. So a lot of people have gotten into this business that don't have the qualifications, don't ever measure this stuff, don't ever verify the design, and spit out this stuff. Even high-end companies, high-end too, but even big companies have gotten lackadaisy about this. I've tested a $2,000 or $3,000 digital audio player from Sony.
I've seen it.
Terrible. Yeah. Terrible. Yeah, I mean, this is Sony. Clearly, I have an analyzer someplace in the company, but not the group that designed this thing. They talk about the gold-plated connectors and, high sample rate, high res, this and that. But, you test it and you're like, gosh. Then I go test some no-name Chinese product and run circles around it. Yeah. It's embarrassing for them,
Well, the audiophile would say, I think what's happening is we have a generation of audiophiles who have been groomed and brought up in, they've been brought up in a world of magazines, because magazines used to be kind of like the Catholic Church, right? They were the holders of all audiophile information, and that's how you got all your, that's how you got everything. Before the internet, there was only audio magazines, and the manufacturers and the magazines obviously are in bed together. Get over it. They are, they provide a large a large majority of the revenue to magazines. And so it's natural for those magazines to not speak strongly about the manufacturers who are advertising with them. That's just the way that kind of relationship evolved. And you have a whole generation of audiophiles where these kind of myths have been perpetuated. And so now you have people on forums who argue ad nauseum about a cable, you know, I changed this cable out or this power cable or that kind of thing. And it's like, no self-respecting audio engineer is going to waste their time arguing with you about 3 feet of cable. Listen, if the RLC values of this cable are the same as a coat hanger, they're going to sound the same.
Right.
Okay.
It's interesting.
There's no difference.
Yeah. Objectively, that's the case.
Yes.
But it's amazing how strong the placebo effect is.
Yes.
I've gone to audio show. The guy says, "Let me change cables," and he sounds different to me. If you
Because
listen to the
you.
guy, more than they told me. Well, there's an interesting phenomenon is that when you're just listening to anything, your brain captures all the information almost losslessly for just a few seconds, but then it remembers very few bits, like kilobits per second. So megabits come in and it remembers just a tiny bit. It remembers you heard a violin, a vocal, a female, whatever.
Yeah,
it's not trying
parsing.
to remember.
It's a parsing machine.
Exactly. He's taking a spectrum analysis, remembering everything in there.
Right.
However, when you're evaluating gear, your mode of listening changes. You all of a sudden focus and you then tear up what you're listening to in that short-term memory and you analyze it and you hear a lot more detail. So what happens in these comparisons is that you have your everyday system, you've been listening to it, then you go buy this new cable, you plug in the new cable, then you listen attentively now to see if there is a difference. And the moment you do that, your brain switches to a new mode of operation, says, yeah, let me listen. Oh, wow. I hadn't heard the clarity of that string before.
But it's not because of the cable. It's because you have put your attention there intentionally.
Exactly. Yeah, it's you that's changing, not the equipment. It's like a Matrix movie with a spoon. The kid says it's not the spoon that's bending, it's you that's bending. You are bending your thing. So that's why when we do a blind test, when you don't know if that cable changed or didn't change, that technique no longer
goes away.
All of a sudden, you can't tell the cables apart.
Yeah, it goes away.
High-end audiophiles have subjected themselves to these double-blind tests, and they failed them miserably.
Every time,
because the reality is not there. So we need to recognize that the person does perceive the difference, and strongly so. They'll swear on a Bible, they'll swear every dollar they have that there's a change, and it's real to them, very, very real to them. But like all placebo effects, that realness disappears the moment you stop paying attention and you just enjoy music. That effect wears off. So what does the audiophile do? He goes and buys a new cable. He buys a new tweak. He puts a little cups under his machine to suspend it. Oh, the clarity was so much better. Veil was removed. Yeah, the veil gets removed 1,000,000 times because every time you change something, you letting your brain and your eyes and everything else pollute the sensation of what your ears pick up. So we've got to use measurements to prove things that are audibly transparent. That's the easiest thing we can do with measurements. We know the threshold of hearing, basically blood rushing through your ear, and the lowest noise level sets the floor of what your ears can pick up. You can argue all you want.
What is that number? What is that number you think?
It's about minus 10 to minus 15 dB.
Oh, okay.
So it's minus 10 to minus 15 dB SPL at between 2 and 5 kilohertz, where everyday nature sounds are. Your hearing has been designed to be these little cups that magnify and amplify that region. At 20 hertz, it goes to 70 dB. So you got like 80 dB loss when it goes down to low frequencies. That's why low frequencies have to be so loud to hear them. High frequencies are the same way, but the mid frequencies, very sensitive. Now the question is, what's the maximum now? The maximum is the playback level. And people have done studies in a concert. If you go to a live concert, what is the sound pressure level if you're sitting in, say, row 4, row 5, your normal thing, not in the orchestra, but sitting in the audience, but not all the way in the back. And that can be as much as 120 dBs to 125 dB. So if you look at that range, you say, all right, if a top is 120 and the bottom is minus 15, in theory, you have 135. In reality, it just is not going to be that good. So I'll bring it down to 115 dB. So if I play a signal and I go 115 dB down and there's no noise and distortion at that level, it is guaranteed to be transparent for you, for me, for anybody with golden ears, non-golden ears, all humans, all music,
yes,
all situations.
Yes, and you know, I have a question, and so that leads me to the first question. So that leads me to the first question, because I have a feeling we could probably talk forever and ever, you know, about this stuff. You know, I've been an audiophile, not nearly as long as you have. You know, I've been an audiophile for about since about 1994, when I got in the Army, when I had enough money to actually buy some things. You know, in Germany, I went to the PX and spent all my cash. You know, but the thing that I wanted to highlight is that 115 dB range. You know, you can find products, if you're, let's say you're talking about electronics, DACs, preamps, amplifiers. One person I follow is Ethan Weiner of Real Trap. I think it's Real Traps.
Real Traps, yeah.
But he says, he's very much in our camp, if you will. But he uses 100 dB as the range, as the number, 100 dB, negative 100 dB as the crossover point to be transparent. If a product is, it has distortion lower than 100 dB and your frequency response is less than, I think, less than a tenth off, between 20 to 20K, it's audibly transparent. Now, what's your take on that?
There's a spectrum in this of how conservative you want to be and how aggressive you want to be. There are people who tell you that, your phone is transparent too, audio out of your computer is transparent. You can take objectivity to an insane level.
I see, right.
I'm not there. I am. So Ethan is one step away from that, but he's more aggressive with his 100 dB than I am. I hold 115 as the deer, guaranteed, where I would bet my life on it.
Okay.
I don't know if he bets his life on a 100. That said, I think when you get past 60 dB to 70 dB, you need to have trained ears to hear it.
Right.
So his 100 dB is fine.
Yeah.
I guarantee you 99% people can't hear anything past 70 dB.
Yeah.
But then you get somebody like me who's trained in certain content, certain tracks, maybe able to hear. Indeed, I have been able to pass double-blind tests from Ethan. He's got a bunch of different tests he's done, like where he takes audio and digitizes it 10 times.
Yeah, and he has them on his website as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I have passed all of those. Yeah. I know most people have no prayer of passing those.
Sure.
So I'd say if you want to prove that something's transparent, 115 is provable, guaranteed, take to the bank. Is 100 just as good? Probably so. Is 90 good? Now you go below the CD even.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you make me cringe.
Yeah.
And the other reason I cringe is that there's no reason to settle for lower numbers.
Sure.
Because I can get you a $99 DAC that's at 115. Why are you telling me I should settle for 100? What's the point of 100? But $99 is too much for you, then it makes no sense to do that. Yeah. Now, amplifiers is harder. For amps to try to get up to 100, 115 dB is per state of the art. And only this Purify amplifier and benchmark amps are able to rise to that level. So with amps,
they're close. I mean, I know the benchmark is there. The Purify is that, isn't it about 104? It's close.
104, 105. It's so close, they don't meet my 115.
Yeah, they're getting there.
But boy, they're still. So for amplifiers, the average that I found is 78, by the way. I've tested 120 amplifiers. The average is 78. Yeah. So 90, 95. So in general, I have another metric that says, look, CD is 16 bits. Every bit is 6 dB. That's 96 dB. Give me at least 16-bit transparency.
Okay, sure.
So that's 96 dB relative to 100 dB that Ethan has. So if you push me, I said, don't push me below 96.
I see. Okay.
At least, yeah. So a lot of tests I do, I said, look, if I'm playing at modest volume, give me the noise and everything should be below 96 dB. So the truth lies somewhere in there. So going back to the cables, I've measured cables. They're at the limit of my analyzer at 125 dB.
Sure.
So I will swear any amount of money, guaranteed, there's no sound in that cable. Yeah. There are a few cables have been made that filter sound, but even those, I think people are not hearing it.
They're just those things are, they're really acting as hard EQs, hardwired EQs. I'm looking for another word, but back in the day we used to call them something
fixed EQ. Yeah, it's a fixed, a 10
filter.
EQ filter. And the problem with the fixed one is that it lays that signature on everything.
And you might not. And some audiophiles like that. I have a very good friend who has these AudioQuest cables that have batteries in them. And I can't tell you.
I've tested those, by the way. I tested the battery one, and DBS is called. The battery does nothing whatsoever.
Yeah, but it makes people think it's a whizzy cool. It lights up, and you got to replace it every 2 or 3 years.
You want to know what the enemy of truth is? Call it lay intuition. Person thinks that their car, when you open the manual, says you got to break in the engine for first 50 hours. Yeah. They accept that. Then they think, okay, then this cable needs to break in 50 hours. This amplifier needs to break in. Nice. To lay intuition,
they attribute that.
Somebody tells you this cable is thicker, it's got a battery, it does this quantum, this and that. And they're like, oh yeah, of course.
There's a direction arrow.
Yeah, there's direction arrow. It must be, and then things are directional. Rivers only go in one direction, they don't go the other direction. So I always say, don't use lay intuition for most things in audio. It doesn't.
It doesn't work like that. Just like,
it does. It's not a lay.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, people say I've got ears, then that's all I need to know what's what. I'm like, no. Just because you have ears doesn't mean you're a doctor. Yeah. You have a body, your own body, but you have no training about how it works. Sure. So your ears, you can't trust your ears because your ears go to your brain and your brain lies to you. So
let's get to some questions. Let me get to some questions here because
go ahead.
I think some people would enjoy this. So Is Audio Science Review for you a business or is it a hobby?
It definitely is not a business. I'm in the hole financially in a significant way. There's no advertising. Yeah. There's no sponsorship. Yeah. I signed up to be an Amazon associate because people kept saying, look, I'm going to go buy this from Amazon when I have some money coming to you. Sure. I wouldn't set it up, but I just don't like people saying you recommended this product because you got a sponsored link. So I'm not using it at all. I see. The only source of income, if you want to call it, is donations from membership. And members donate whatever they want. Sure. Some people donate $5, some people donate more. Okay. The money is good because I pay thousands of dollars in shipping costs alone every year.
I can imagine.
Stuff. Most of the time, members pay to have something come to me, but I'll pay to ship it back. Speakers and larger boxes, everything is basically expensive to ship. And there's, of course, all the cost of the equipment, constantly having to buy things also. Need a special cable to test this, needs to build a jig for that. There's an ongoing hosting cost. I want to make sure the server is very, very fast. So we have a quad-core CPU with SSD storage, and it just runs lightning fast, and I like it that way. Yeah, it does. And reliability. So all these things cost money on this thing. But no, it is not a business today. Okay. I like it to have a business value one day, not for me, but I look at, where I am in my life cycle, and I say, well, 10 years from now, I don't know if I have the health that I have now to go pick up speakers and put them on the thing and do it. At some point, this thing needs to be handed off to somebody. And I hope on that day, it has a positive value where somebody will say, oh, yeah, we could take this and run it.
That's worth something,
rather than trying to find somebody like me who's going to put money in it just for the sake of putting money in it. Right. That is, and it'll die. There's been people whose sites have died because of that when they passed away or they, lost interest, and all of a sudden their site just,
has went with them. It didn't survive into perpetuity.
Yeah, so I want this to be a healthy thing. I think ultimately it should be one, but it's not a short-term goal or even medium-term goal. It's so easy to just turn on ads. I mean, I get people constantly hounding me on, let me sell ads on your site. And we've grown tremendously. We passed Audiophile. We've passed every site out there other than Headfi, which focuses on headphones. Yeah. And DIY Audio, I think, are the only two forums and sites that are ahead of us. We've surpassed every audio forum out there by far. I'm trying to think what our monthly 2.5 million visitors a month right now. So it is a massive scale, and it's grown because people like, what we're doing here. So it has potential to be a business. but that's not my reason for starting it and doing what I do.
Okay, all right. And then I won't. I had another question. The website views prompted me to ask another question, and that was about SuperAudioBestFriends. The forum there. There's some contention there. There's some issue there. What's that about? I didn't. Hold on one second. Let me make sure that.
Okay.
I'm making sure that this. Okay. I want to make sure that it wasn't coming through my speakers.
No problem.
There's some contention that I've read there. What's that about? Is that big? When
I first started to test DACs, I found this good DACs. Then I tested the first Shed DAC, and it didn't perform well. Then I tested another one. It didn't perform well. That news got to them, and at that time they were far more popular than us. And Shed is one of their sponsors. They post there. And to them was just a total dishonor. I mean, who's this kid who has bought an analyzer? Surely doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He must be making mistakes. We've been praising these products. This guy's an idiot. And between us, some of the people there, just the level of professionalism and maturity is not where it should be. I'm sure in their everyday jobs, they're far more professional, but once they pick up an alias and go there.
Being anonymous on the internet has really allowed people to act in a way that they would not act in person to you.
Exactly.
The basic human decency.
Right. So they got quite rude and they went all out. Fortunately for Truth and us, Shed also realized that those products did have issues, bought a proper analyzer, redesigned all their products, and volunteered to send them to me for testing. And that relationship has transformed tremendously, and the company I have tremendous respect for today for turning on a dime and doing this, despite how tough it was on them.
I've seen that.
My reviews come out.
And I've seen it actually too. Several of the ship products, you see the transformation happening in real time. You just watching the site, seeing this this DAC be reviewed, and it didn't perform. It didn't perform very good. But now you have the preamps like the Freya and some of the other ones are they're kicking butt. I would
state of the art.
They're state of the art, and you'd be. Were it not for other things that you can provide, were it not for other things in audio that provide value, reliability, looks, build quality, those are worthy things to spend money on as you see fit. But as far as pure performance goes, the shit stuff is
they've done it, and they have
running pretty good.
They have great prices too and great support, and I recommend their products all the time now. And,
I've always liked the designers though. I've always been the Theta guy. Moffat's. I've always been the Theta guy.
They're quite characters, and you need that. I mean, it gives them very strong marketing. Funny thing is, until about a year ago, they were more popular than our forum. Their website selling products was more popular than almost any other audio forum. That's the level of traffic they have.
They came out. I think it's something to be said for originality. They and they're veterans. I think whatchamacallit's from
Moffat,
Audio Alchemy. Well, Moffat from Theta, and then whatchamacallit from Audio Alchemy, I believe. When you've been in the industry as long as they have, they don't give a shit. These people, they know what they're doing. They're comfortable in their skin. And they know the electronics. And I do commend them for making awesome stuff. I was when I had my website High on Hi-Fi that ran for maybe a year or two. I was in contact with them and I reviewed a couple of their products, but that was when I was doing the subjective stuff, which is, it's flowery, it's silky, it's these kinds of adjectives and stuff. And I did a few reviews of like that, and a couple of those reviews are still out there online. But it's just a progression. I realize now, what silky means to me does not mean it means something totally different to you. So in other words, it's a meaningless term to be used. A more accurate term and something more accurate would be, it's down 3 dB between 2 kilohertz and 4 kilohertz. It's down 3 dB. Now, what does that mean? That means that it's going to be perceived generally as, let's say, it's going to be recessed. You're going to have a recession in voices. Sean Connery's voice, let's say, would sound thin if you had that, not as thick. Right, you see. So translating what the measurements mean into regular layman's, I think, is important, and I don't think that's been done in our industry. It's more of the same. Piling on more words and more words to describe things. Lifting the veil. All these kinds of things don't really. Right. They exacerbate the problem, and I think we've just compounded it. So
teaching is a great point, because I taught for many years, and to me, every time I write anything, I think about how I'm going to teach it. That's why when you look at my graphs, they have color in them, they have annotation right on the graph, tell you what to look at, what to pay. You get these other guys' measurements, just some high resolution graph, you can't even see it.
You have no idea what that means.
A bunch of text way below it, you have to keep looking back. What's he talking about?
Yeah.
This is what a lot of people are missing, and why we're growing is because people look at the review, and I don't have hardly any words in them. My reviews are very short, but the few words that are in there are the important words you need to say and say.
It's funny, I'm kind of a mentor of mine, Barry Willis. He's used to be a stereophile writer for a number of years, and he writes now for Hi-Fi News, British magazine. But when I first started writing reviews, I looked for people's reviews that I enjoyed reading, and his reviews were reviews that I enjoyed reading. So I just emailed him one day, say, hey, would you kind of edit these reviews that I'm doing? He wrote back, and he lives in the Bay Area, with close to me. We became really good friends, and we're still friends to this day. But he's always telling me, hey man, he's very much in our camp. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. You don't need more than 500 words to describe any. You don't need more than 500 words to do any review. And so I took that to heart. And but I even tried to kind of push it onto an online magazine that I was writing for at the time, and they didn't like that. They wanted to stick with their, don't come to our game and try to change it. This is what we do. If you want to do something different, you're gonna have to start your own thing. So
they also need to have 20 pages so they can have ads on every page. Hit next, hit next, hit next, hit next. So
I was young.
Yeah,
I was young, and I was thinking.
You have a business model, that's different. If it's a business for somebody, their livelihood is that, things are different. I always look at these things and I say, it's really about a point of view about a product.
Okay.
When I'm doing a bunch of measurements and I analyze a product, it nets out to something to me, and I want to make sure that comes across. A lot of reviewers aren't that way. They
What
just
do you
talk.
mean? What do you mean it nets out something to you?
So if I take a product and I measure it and I'm like, smells like they didn't know what the hell they were doing right here. There's no way this should be doing this.
Yes.
That is the message, that the competence was not there in designing this product. Now, I'm going to give you the A to Z measurements, but I want to make sure there's a point of view that says, look, this is not a product that I say has been designed well. There's a design flaw in here that was never measured. Clearly, they didn't see these problems, or on purpose designed a flawed product. This is not like, there are people who take a good amp module, then they put a front end on it and screw it up.
Do you think Do you think they do that? Why do you think they do that? That's the question. Why, if the let's say the purify amplifiers are pretty much the biggest game in town right now, why does someone euphonics something onto it to euphonically make the sound, shape the sound, if they're really after what they say they're after, which is transparency?
Let me give you a better example, which is Denon and Marantz. They're sister companies.
Mm-hmm. Well, now they are.
AVRs, the heart of the system is identical. Yeah. What Marantz team then does is that takes some of the IC electronics and replaces it with discrete circuits. They call it HTAM. And those discrete circuits lower the measured performance, literally increase distortion and noise. Now, his top letter advertisement of how that's so great is discrete. But when I talk to him, I'm like, look, this is making things worse. The answer is, well, we have a couple of golden ear people who think it sounds better.
I see.
I smile and I said, thank you very much.
Yeah.
No, the golden ear people need to do controlled listening tests. They need to do blind listening tests. If their blind listening test shows that it sounds better, hallelujah. That'll be a major paper you could publish and become famous. But my sense is that it just makes things worse. So I tell people, don't buy Marantz, buy the Denon. It's a little cheaper and actually performs better.
Right.
So you go back to those
Without
other companies.
the
Yeah, PS Audio put in this front end design that is just not good. It reduced the performance of this HyperX modules or ICE modules that we're using. It just lowered the performance. It has zero sonic value. Now, why did they do it? I'm sure they put it in there and did the thing I was telling you earlier. Oh, let's listen to it. Oh, listen to that detail. Listen how much better it is. Blacker backgrounds and all this stuff. But they didn't do one blind test to see if they don't know it's their own amplifier, whether they actually made it better or worse. In reality, they made it worse and then made it more expensive because they're hand building that module versus the rest of it that came as mass market product.
Like an off-the-shelf.
Believing their own hype, basically. What is happening is that the high-end audio is starting to believe the lay intuition of their customers. They're literally starting to follow what these guys want.
Yes.
They want to have a case that's suspended and is made out of gold and is 40,000 pounds and got gold wiring and silver wiring in it. They go ahead and build all that stuff, and it costs a fortune to build it.
Do you think the way my view of that is that the high-end audio space is atrophying? From my view, let's face it. The generation of the golden age of audiophiles, I think, it's past, or I think the companies it's waning. Teal, Dunleavy, companies there's companies are falling by the wayside, every year, and so manufacturers are chasing a smaller and smaller population of people, and there's not being repopulated by young audiophiles. Those guys are interested in their electronics, headphones.
I think you're only seeing the part that's visible to you, which is the general audiophile community that hangs around the forums. Most of these companies sell to very wealthy individuals who don't ever go on a forum.
Sure.
They just tell their handler, their agent, go buy me the best stereo there is for my new house.
But do you think that population is increasing?
Is huge. There's a lot of money out there.
Is it? Okay.
However, folks make that, and we have a company called Madrona Digital. We do very high-end custom business. We do homes for $5, $10, $20 million. We go in and put in $600,000 systems, not necessarily AV systems, but shades, lighting, security, and everything. These are just.
I see.
Go ahead and put it in. Go ahead and put it. I want the best.
Well, I've been involved. Prior in my career, that I did integration as well. Here in the Sacramento area, which is same thing. There's a lot of sports. There's a lot of sports teams here.
Sports teams.
The Kings, and I've been in all those. I've been in all those kinds of establishments and systems. So I understand exactly what you mean. I just see in the high-end audio market, as far as the hobbyists or the people like myself and like you. And from my purview, it feels like that space is atrophying. That population of people who were the golden age of audiophilia, those guys are dying. So from my point of view, I feel like the space is getting smaller. But I guess listen, I hope it doesn't die.
Right. I mean, the question is, if all of a sudden you were handed $5 million check from stock options or what have you, would you go buy a $20,000 amplifier or would you not? I think there's still a number of people who will go buy it, expensive amplifier. Because
I go by the benchmark.
Or the benchmark. I mean, that stuff is expensive, right, in the grand scheme of things. So I don't know that it's dying, but it's certainly not a large market to begin with. There's this world that says the worldview of audio that says the low end is huge and the top of the market is huge. In between is a crappy market, and in between is $1,000 to $10,000 market, by the way. That is a sort of a no man's land.
That's a huge
range.
But
once you go, that's why like a Wilson speaker isn't even $20,000. If you go at $40,000, $50,000 and above, that market is remaining there because those healthy, very wealthy individuals are still there. The middle guys are the ones that get squeezed, and that market is sort of disappearing.
I've seen that in the last. That in the last 10 years.
And mostly because of all these economic booms we've had, where people all of a sudden become so wealthy, they go buy a $300,000 car, and they go buy a $1,500,000 audio system too, in a multi-million-dollar home. So when a friend comes over, they just say, "Yeah, check out this beautiful
Look how cool
system.
this is. Look how cool this
Yeah.
is. Look at these. Look how big these speakers are. You know.
Exactly. And I like high end to a point where if somebody said engineer something and cost is not an issue, it's a wonderful opportunity. If you can sit there, hand tweak every, hand match every part. The problem is that half the time they're doing that, but the other half the time they're following myths and garbage and produce low performing product, despite the beautiful chassis, beautiful design, where you just want to hang it on the wall and look at it. So the engineer in me and the mechanical engineering, electrical engineering is superb in some of these things.
Yeah.
But what they aspire to do, they never measured it. It's high distortion, high noise, and you're like, Past Labs is a great example. Yeah. Revered engineer, but he builds these things with no feedback. Or little feedback, and it's just distortion factories, as I call them.
Yeah, and they're local. I was just talking to my very good friend. I happen to be lucky enough that Past Labs is right here in my backyard.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I just spoke to a buddy of mine who dropped off his amplifier at the factory today. To have something added to the amplifier, so they're that close.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go to our next question, which is, we've talked about your test equipment already. The first part of it, the speaker measuring part of it. What are some of the other pieces of test equipment that you have, and can you tell them what they do and that kind of thing? The AP is probably one of those.
Sure.
Some stuff you have there in the back there.
Yeah, you can sit in the corner to see the audio precision.
Okay, yeah.
Ironically, the AP that I started with didn't support testing USB DACs, so I had to go ahead and buy another one, which is this one. This is called the APX 555 series. Mm-hmm. It's a top-of-the-line analyzer that Audio Precision sells. And Audio Precision owns this market. Long time ago, Hewlett-Packard owned the market. Tektronix and some of the companies did. Agilent was their new name, or QSight is the latest name. Mm-hmm. But this company started up in California, and they decided to just focus on audio, and they built the first stereo analyzer. At the time, all analyzers were mono, and they decided that the guts should be in the PC. So the software runs in the PC, and the device is dumb, has no display. All other test instruments are like my scope back there, you can see as a display. And those are pain in the neck to use, and their CPUs are slow. Whereas if you put the processing in a PC, things get a lot better. Yeah. Anyway, these guys have been in business for 30 years, and they still own this market, and they have a strong hold on it, so they don't sell stuff cheap. The list price for this is $28,000. They sell a cheaper one for $15,000 and a cheaper one for $7,000, but unfortunately the performance drops. And there are $10 DACs that are better than those $15,000 boxes. So if you want to test what I test, you have to have this, unfortunately. It's $28,000. Well, let me ask you,
that brings me to the next question. I read an article from Archie Mago, and he said there is a such thing as good enough.
Yeah.
You don't need, for example, you don't need the Hubble telescope to see the moon.
Earlier discussion we had. What is good enough?
Yeah, what is good enough? Right.
I've passed Archie Mago's test, by the way. He had a double-blind test of 24-bit versus 60.
Yeah.
I managed to pass that. So, and he said the results of survey was that most people couldn't, or hardly anybody could tell the difference. Yes, if you want to average out everybody, good enough can be pretty low. Yeah. My thing is that it costs zero to build state-of-the-art today. You can build a DAC that is guaranteed to be audibly transparent, and you can build one that is not, is the good enough one, and they cost the same.
I know what you mean.
Why would you want to encourage the market to build both garbage ones and great ones when there's no cost advantage? Yeah. You move a component 2 or 3 millimeters to the right, and it changes the performance of a DAC. Is that sensitive? We're talking about such small noise levels and precision you need. But luckily with surface mount devices, we can get things close. You just need to understand that digital and analog need to be separated. They need to have the right power supply, but the cost is not an issue. So it's a great question. People ask me, isn't it all transparent, and the one that's not very good? I say yes, but it costs nothing to get fully transparent one. Get the best one. Why are you trying? Analogy I use is that if the waiter in the kitchen, before he brought you soup, spit in it, are you going to taste the difference, or are you going to go to the hospital and get sick? No. He will taste the same. You're probably not going to the hospital either. But do you want the guy to spit in it or not? I'd rather no, or they didn't wash the dishes. So
Sure.
same over here. I'd say it costs nothing to get quality engineering.
Sure.
We need to encourage quality engineering.
Yeah.
We need to keep people from building substandard stuff because they think we can't tell any difference.
Yeah. So you know, one thing that I you know, I have an RME Babyface Pro FS.
Yeah.
You know, which is, you know, I think you measured it, and it does. I use that as my audio interface, but it probably would work as a very basic, you know, D to A converter or measurement device.
Yeah.
So how does someone get in? How does someone get into it if they don't want to buy the $20,000, you know, audio, you know, AP device, or buy, you know, the Agilent, you know, for example, like I said, I have my Babyface. Yeah. I'm pretty sure you could rig that up with, you know, a couple of bits to make it measure DACs, you know, some electronics.
Yeah, it's a tough road to hoe.
Yeah.
There's almost no answer to that, unfortunately. Let me tell you what the two problems are. One is what software you're going to use. I've tested all software that runs on top of a sound card to measure things. All of them running what I call open loop mode. They run a test signal and they capture it and analyze it. That only tests for a certain number of things. What the AP can do through its software is that it can send one signal and measure it, then change the signal and measure it, change the signal and measure it. It can even loop. I can tell it to look for 1% distortion out of an amplifier. It keeps changing the amount of power the amplifier puts out till it can get to 1% and it reports that number. So if you don't have this, you can't do what I do. You can't run some of the tests I do. Some you can. You can run a jitter test. You can run a distortion test, but you can't do all. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that you cannot measure anything that has power. Your sound card cannot be hooked up to a power amplifier that outputs lots of wattage, which means lots of voltage. You would burn up the input of that thing.
You need something you need an intermediary there.
That steps it down.
Between it and the device under test.
And not only it needs to do that, it needs to do it with the highest precision, and it needs to do it at different levels. So this thing has relays that constantly adapts itself to the signal input and presents the best signal through its A to D converters.
I see.
So with those two, you basically out of commission doing 80% of what I do. Then the last bit that kills you is that your Babyface Pro is a fine device, but it's worse than the $99 DAC in noise and distortion that it has.
Wow,
so when you measure that, you get misleading information, which is the sum of the distortions and noise of the little interface, plus the DAC. You measure in both. You never measure in just one.
Right.
And so the results are very disappointing. There's a company called Quantum Asylum that makes it analyze it as $500 and solves some of these problems. And I've reviewed it.
It's a little red
Q401 thing.
Little red
bar.
Okay.
But don't keep your hopes high. It won't do what I do. So I wish I had better news for you. I don't have better news.
Darn.
You can't do that. So you got to rely on me or somebody else doing the measurements or spend $28,000. All
right, let me go to my next question then.
All right.
So there's a lot of, so some people say that they listen to music, not stare at GRAS. Why should they care about these measurements? What, you know, I think we talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak on it a little more clearly.
It's the most derogatory thing they say about us, which is, why should I look at any measurements? You know, I use my ears and I'm done. I'd say, well, how are you going to evaluate a system you don't own yet, right? You want to go shop for a system. What are you going to go by? Your ears aren't in manufacturers. So the manufacturer is telling you all these flower words. How do you know what to buy? Oh, you're going to go get them one at a time and listen to them? I mean, what is that process? Who gives you that kind of return privileges all the time? And why would you not measure? Because the measurements give you another data point that is valuable. So then they turn that around and say, you guys also don't listen to music, which is crap. You know, I listen to music all the time. Just because I measure doesn't mean I don't listen to music. I love music. So bottom line is, look, your ears don't work by themselves. You combine it with your brain. Your brain is producing faulty data all the time. I can't put any value on what you think your ears are telling you. What I put value on is measurements that are reliable. So I'm looking for reliable data that I can stand behind. When I do a review, you challenge me, I can prove what I'm saying based on what I've measured.
Right.
When you say this speaker is the best speaker in the world, or this headphone's the best headphone in the world, it's got so much detail, it's so much,
You can put that to the test.
I can get anybody to say that to me, and it means nothing to me. I mean, it's just not reliable.
Sure. Yeah, you can put that. These are all testable things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so that leads me to the next question: is you have us, a lot of audio manufacturers, prominent ones. PS Audio is one where they just say things like all the things. Pass does the same thing. All the things that need to be measured aren't measured. We don't know all. We don't. I think that the thing is, we're not sure. We can measure lots of things, but we don't. We don't know what to be what can be measured. And how do you feel about that?
There's actually a sister argument to that. Also says we don't understand how the brain works. Since we don't know how the brain works, since we can't measure everything, therefore we can't possibly quantify performance of a device. I have to use a human, my ears and my brain to figure it out. So I'd say both of these things are faulty because people aren't thinking it through. If you look at a perfect device, what's a perfect audio device? A perfect audio device is what we call a linear device, which means that its performance is a straight line. You give it an input, it gives you an output. You change the input, it proportionally changes the output. It never does anything different than a linear line. And the slope of this line tells you whether it amplifies or it doesn't amplify. An amplifier is higher, which means you put a small signal in, it gives you a big signal. Preamp can go below, you can turn the volume down. And the purpose of a DAC is that it has to be perfectly, you give a digital sample, and it gives you an analog value, and it has to do that perfectly. Once you have such a device, it gives you 100% of what your source is providing to you. So when you get a digital file and you play it, such a device, if it exists end-to-end all the way to the speakers, it is guaranteed to be the best audio device, period. Now, if you want to color the sound, change the sound, then you're second-guessing the producer of music and the talent. I'm not in that business, but sometimes those people produce music with bad tonality, and you may want to have tone controls. But put that aside for a second. I can guarantee to you that I can tell you if a device has a straight line. How do I test the straight line? I feed it a signal, and I watch what comes out. Those synads, those distortion, THT plus N, those tell me what noise got added and whether this line has any curves to it. Slightest tilt that is not even visible to your eye if I magnify it 1,000 times, this analyzer can pick. This analyzer can tell you that such a small amount has been changed that is 125 dB down, 140 dB down, 160 dB down.
Wow,
I can go 30, 40, 50, 60 dBs below your hearing threshold and tell you whether this line is straight or is not straight.
So is there a such thing as the shaping of the sound? A couple of amplifier companies spend a lot of time in shaping, quote unquote, shaping the sound, and that is, the distortion artifact, the distortion profile, the components, second order, third order harmonics, and how much of those are does the device contain, which has an effect on the sound quality of that particular device. What do you think about those kinds of devices, the shaping of the sound?
Two parts to that. Psychoacoustics tells us that if you have a tone that you're playing, there's a little umbrella on both sides of it that says that we can't hear anything else inside that shadow. It casts a shadow before it, and it casts the bigger shadow to its right. So if I have a 1 kilohertz tone and a 2 kilohertz tone are next to it, and that shadow covers the 2 kilohertz tone, that's the distortion second harmonic. You won't hear it. It's as if it's not there.
You're not going to hear it. It masks it.
But if I have the 7th harmonic, it's outside of that shadow, then that becomes obviously audible. So people tend to say that second harmonic tends to be less audible, therefore less harmful than a 3rd or 4th or 5th or whatever higher order ones. So at first it sounds like what you said is true, right? That you do want a certain shape to these things, right? You want to have more of the low order ones like tubes tend to produce and less of those things. My answer to that is that it's bogus. You actually want none of those to be audible, and I can give that to you. Those high order ones you can't hear. The low order ones you can't hear because most audiophiles don't have trained hearing. Most audiophiles cannot hear what I call nonlinear distortions. What's a nonlinear distortion? Let's talk about what's linear distortion. A speaker has linear distortion. Some frequencies are louder than the others, right? But they don't produce any distortion. They're just louder. 2 kilohertz is louder than 3 kilohertz, but 2 kilohertz one doesn't generate other tones because of that nonlinearity. Sure. Everybody hears those. We may not be as good as exactly about describing them, but if I turn up the treble on a preamp, you and I both will say, oh, that sounds high-pitched. However, the kind of distortion you're asking about is nonlinear distortions when that curve is slightly changed. Frequency response is still perfect. Those distortions, most audiophiles can't hear. So when they say this tube thing, it has distortion that's good, my answer is you're probably not hearing the distortion. Because when I listen to that tube amp, it sounds harsh to me.
But what are they hearing? What are they hearing? They're saying that it's the euphonic, and I've experienced it myself. I've had giant tube amplifiers with KT88s and giant heaters. Their audiophiles would call that the euphonics, that tube sound, the warm sound. What do you call it? You call it distortion? Well, I mean, it is distortion at the end of the day. It is distortion, but
it's got multiple answers depending on the situation. I'd say most of the time people think tubes sound warm is because the tube looks like it's got a heater and is warm because perception is it must be warm. But there's a technical answer which says that it could have high impedance. And if it has high impedance, depending on what speaker you put on it, it changes that linear response of the speaker. It can actually give you different tonality, it can increase the mid-range, and it all depends on the speaker because the two impedances interact with each other. So that's real.
Okay, that's like a tone. That's like a tone control. That's almost like a tone control. If you are,
it is a tone control, but it's a static tone control, which means it'll always do that.
Yeah, to all the signals that run through it. Yeah.
So if you want all of your highs to always be brighter, your highs will always be brighter, and you don't want that. But it does do that. The third one is what you said. The third one is when the impedance is low, so that's not happening, and the distortion is high. I hear it as true distortion. I hear it as harshness. I've tested countless tube headphone amps. 99% of them sound distorted to me. They especially sound distorted when you turn up the volume. I mean, it's just, they get really bad. And once you get tuned to it, you can lower the volume and you still hear distortion. Yet the people say those are all warm sounding. And I guarantee they're not warm sounding. They're actually harsh sounding. I see. But people look at the glowing tube and that psychology of it is there's one last one is that the tube out a lot of voltage, so they can drive these headphones quite loud. And so people are listening to them louder versus an anemic transistor, source or direct from a phone or something. So yeah, it'll clean those people's clocks, those other products' clocks, because it plays louder, and louder always sounds more impressive.
But that's more of a trick of volume.
It is.
It doesn't have anything to do with quality. But
that's right.
People are perceiving that loudness as a quality increase.
Right. So in my book, there is no advantage to high distortion products. None.
I hear it very often from the manufacturers that we've done listening tests. I don't know who these listening tests they're doing them with, but people prefer MOSFET sound to bipolar transistor. This argument, JFETs, VFETs. All these kinds of things, where and those are essentially built-in sound shaping distortion components built into those transistors, right?
It is, and if you measure them, look at the spectrum, that will be different. The threshold for those is so low, their levels are so low, those distortions, I guarantee you, none of those designers have good listening skills. People assume that if you're Nelson Pass, that you're very gifted analog designer, you therefore must also know how to evaluate audio. They're two different things. Sure. I was an electrical engineer, grew up designing electronics, analog electronics. I knew zero about sound evaluation until I trained myself. Sure. Just because you're a great electronic designer doesn't mean you're a skilled, trained listener. So they design their own amplifiers. They're biased already. That's their amp. I just changed the feedback. Whoa, listen to that sound. Got so much better.
It works for me.
Of course, got to do one blind test, publish it, match levels, then I believe you. Everything else, just don't tell me about it because I know it's wrong. I can prove it to you. I offered thousands of dollars in the past to go to people's homes even, prove to them that what they say about these amps and stuff is false. And people wouldn't take me up on it. It just isn't true. I'm telling you. I've tested so many audiophiles, they can't even tell compression artifacts in an MP3 where we've thrown away 90% of the music. And yet they want to tell me that these distortion profiles that are 80, 90, 100 dB down made the sound warmer.
Yeah.
No, the sound doesn't get warmer anyway. If you think about your, the spectrum of harmonic distortion, right? It always travels to the right. It always travels to high frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
So if you add distortion to music, and music has tons of spectrum, right? It doesn't have just one tone.
Sure.
It has millions of tones, right?
Sure.
At all frequencies. All of them generate harmonic distortion, and they all slide to the right. So what does that sound like from intuitive point of view? You're increasing the energy of high frequencies versus having no distortion. If you increase the high frequency energy, they're going to sound brighter, they're going to sound harsher. They don't sound warmer. Why would they sound warmer? The distortion isn't at 500 hertz. The distortion travels at multiples of the fundamentals.
Higher up in the frequency range.
Yeah, so if you got fifth harmonic of 1 kilohertz, already 5 kilohertz. How would 5 kilohertz give you warmth?
Yeah.
It doesn't. Like I said, the only valid cases have high impedance, and that combines with a headphone or speaker, and that can change things. All other arguments are wrong. The transistor types, I tell people, it's not your job to design an amplifier or speaker. I don't care what a speaker is made out of. Kevlar this and that material this, and I did this, and I'm like, it's all a black box.
Monocoque frames. Like the Magico stuff.
About his frequency response and his distortion. If you don't get those two right, I don't care what material you put in it.
It's irrelevant.
It's your problem, not my problem.
Well, I think you have to find value. There's a case to be made for people who want to spend their money on. I brought up Magico a minute ago.
Sure.
Magico makes amazing looking products. They're in the Bay Area. They make amazing looking stuff. I don't know how any of their stuff measures, to be quite frank with you. Have you measured any of their things, their products?
No, I haven't had a Magico. I've heard them at shows all the time, but they play their demo content on this thing.
Yeah, and I think they sound pretty good. From what I've heard, I haven't listened. I've seen them measured in the normal magazines, but of course they measure well. But I think for what you get. Yeah, there's a certain type of buyer who wants that, the look, the status, and
sure.
That part I'm not. And let me get this clear so the viewers know. We're not saying that you should not be buying whatever the hell you want to buy. That's your choice. We're just talking about kind of audio performance here, and we are, at least from my point of view, I'm saying that you can get a $500 bookshelf speaker that can perform the same as a $50,000 bookshelf speaker. You just have to find the one that you just have to find that one. And and you've measured several of these bookshelf speakers that would sound every bit as good measurement wise as a larger, a more expensive speaker.
Right.
And so
you're making a good point. I have $23,000 speakers myself, pair of Revell Salon 2s. I have amplifiers that cost $25,000 each. I have 2 monoblocks that are $50,000 retail. Why do I have them? I love the looks. They also, of course, perform. The amplifiers are 1,000 watts. The Salon 2s are just incredible sound. Yeah. So, a lot of people constantly say, this guy, Amir hates cheap stuff and he just wants to convince people to buy 2-cent stuff. No. Look matters. The feeling matters.
Reliability, access to the company. All those things are important. That's
finish of the thing matters. There's these giant things sitting in my home. I want the speaker to be gorgeous. I want it to look nice. So every one of my speaker reviews talks about how a product looks, how it feels, what the design is like.
Yeah, if it's cheap feeling.
What I don't like is that I pay $25,000 and I get severe design flaws in that $25,000 speaker. Then we're not friends.
Yeah,
I'm gonna, you had unlimited budget almost to design a great speaker, and you spend it all on the cabinet. You didn't measure
nothing on the engineering.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many speakers are designed without one time measuring it in an anechoic chamber. I mean, they're selling expensive speakers, but they're too cheap to spend $2,000. Take them to a local university or somebody and say, hey, measure this once for me and let me fix obvious flaws in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, but they clearly have mistakes in them. I mean, it's just a mistake. It's a design mistake.
Well, I think, like you said, I think it's, audiophiles or people, anyone can start a business. audiophiles are, I guess you'd say, kind of ripe for ripe for the picking. As long as you have some very cool marketing materials, a strong sense of salesmanship, and you can sell audiophiles nearly anything. A bottle of rocks, these little doohickeys that go in your corner of your, where physics tells us that device, I don't care what the hell it's made out of, folks. It doesn't matter what it's made out of. Physics
can't do that.
It cannot. Just the physics of it. I don't care if it's made out of rare earth unobtainium. The physics of it, if it's this tiny, cannot affect things exactly. They cannot. It doesn't work that way. Okay, the physics doesn't work that way. So that leads me to the next question. It seems that you don't contact companies. You don't contact companies when you find problems with them. Why not? Why not? Wouldn't that make for more fair, correct review for them to give? Like if you see Stereophile or any of the other magazines, they get a company response back, and it gives the company an opportunity to either honestly report, or for some companies it's kind of more like the apologetics team.
Right.
The apologetics team comes on board and says, oh well, here's it's the this, it's the that, But some companies actually do say, thanks for bringing that to our attention. We didn't know. We'll take a look at it.
We'll fix it. It's a good question. It comes up all the time as a complaint. So let me address it different ways. I look at my role as I'm not a journalist. I'm not running a magazine. I'm not a reporter. I'm not any of those things. If you want to go buy a used car and you had a mechanic friend, you take him with you. He looks at the used car, he opens the hood, and he says, oh, man, you don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. Look at the oil leaking over here. Your next question to him isn't, can you contact Ford and find out if it's supposed to leak over here? Because it just might. You sure you know what you're talking about? Maybe you don't know. Maybe you don't know that oil. That may be normal for that car. Why don't you contact Ford for me? And until you do, I'm sorry, I can't listen to you.
I see.
You won't do that with him, right? I am that person for you for audio. Somebody has a piece of audio gear. They send it to me and say, Amir, can you measure, tell me if it's a good piece of equipment or it's not a good piece of equipment? Instead of just telling him, I also tell everybody else.
I see.
Okay? So at one level, I say, that's what I have set up to do. I haven't set up to be a magazine. I'm not running ads. I'm not doing any of those. Now, about 5% of the time, manufacturers do send me stuff. When they send me stuff, I will contact them.
Okay.
And when I measure something, as a courtesy, I tell them, look, I don't have to do this because I don't do it for when somebody sends me your gear. But as a courtesy, if I find issues, I'll come run it for you. So for Denon AVRs, I made a promise to them. The first one didn't go well for them. I said, look, from now on, I'll run it by them. So in every case, I ran it by them. What was the outcome? 3 to 4 days for them to send the stuff to Japan, get the answer back, us discussing, delay the review by a week. Meanwhile, I'm sitting on this machine. People are going buying it, not knowing there's an issue. There's not an issue. One case. Other cases, I've sent messages to manufacturers. Couldn't care less. They won't even answer me. I'm like, look, even when it's done a good review, I say, hey, I just did a good review. What do you think? I'm on good design. No answer. So as far as many of them are concerned, is that I'm a Joe blogger. Some online guy. Did some testing is beneath us. What do we care what this guy is? What he says, what he does. So because of those reasons, and then the last one is logistics. I get a piece of equipment, I'm reviewing it, I'm going to the next one the next day. A magazine reviews 5 things every month. I'm not doing 5 things every month. Some of the reviewers get the equipment for months before they're done with the review. I'm not in that business. You didn't pay me. You didn't advertise with me. I have nothing to do. Now, the other part is competence. I've developed profiles for all these tests. So this analyzer, I don't just go fiddle with all the knobs. It's got inputs and outputs I hook up, and I bring up a template test, and I say run.
I see. So
boom, the same numbers pop out.
I was reading what is it, Audio Express magazine, and I think Stuart Yannicker was talking about the automated tests, automated testing of various softwares, and there's stuff you could set up. Is that what you're talking about? Where you run a?
Yeah, let me pull you back a little bit from that. There are people who set up batch scripts and run 50 tests and dump them all online. So these are the 50 graphs, you go look at them.
Okay.
I run interactively. Every test is a profile, so all of these parameters are fixed, but I analyze it before I go to the next one. So if the first test doesn't do something right, then I'm like, wait a second, why is the noise so high on this thing? Before I run all the other tests, let me change the grounding. Let me change the inputs. So every test is custom it's a handcrafted test in that I look at it, I analyze it, I pay attention to it, then I'll go to the next one. I haven't made it into a batch script, which I can do, but I prefer to pay attention to each one. But the parameters for the test, I've done so many of these products already. You showing up with DAC number 288, excuse me, there's nothing I can do wrong. I plug in the output and I plug in the USB cable and say, go.
Go for it. Yeah,
Problems happen once in a while. Yeah. 1 out of 100 times something unique happens.
Yeah.
It just happens. There are some shit devices, for example, where my software downsamples to 16-bit for no reason. The first time it bit me.
Yeah.
And once I discovered it, I'm like, oh, crap. And when I discovered it, by the way, I go back and edit the original review, put a note in there. Magazines will never recall their magazines, do they? They print the magazine, something wrong with it. They're not recalling the magazine to go fix it.
Yeah, well, I think what they do is they have a letter. They have a
some letter comes 6 months later.
Yeah, they have a they have I think in a magazine I saw in the back of maybe one of the magazines, old magazine, maybe audio or stereo or something like that, where they posted corrections. Corrections that they had in previous issues, but. I don't think most audiophiles really would read that stuff. But that leads me to the next question. What's been the industry reaction to your work? And we kind of talked about this a bit. We've kind of been talking about it, but in a more direct way, what's been the industry reaction to your work?
It has bifurcated into different categories. The companies that have always cared about engineering now know about me and volunteer and come to me. Like Purify, when they made the first Purify module, they came to me as the launch site. Didn't go to the Stereophile, didn't go to 20 other places.
Really? That's the eval one?
The eval unit, I got the first one, and they launched it with me.
Wow.
That said, look, we're giving you the first one ever. And it's like, wow, really? Out of blue. I mean, they reached out to me, the company CEO, founders, Bruno, and I was just like, yeah, we're going to send you one. Will you do it for us? So I'm like, of course. Because why? Because they know if they want to the key about that amplifiers is engineering and technical performance, right? So where else do you go but me? Because they know I'm going to do the testing and I'm going to bring out the best thing. They weren't looking for flowery, reviews. They wanted to show off his technical thing. So Benchmarks of the world, them and others volunteer. Tons of, ironically, Chinese companies come to me. Why do they come to me? Because they have no brand awareness. I bring them tremendous brand awareness, and they engineer their stuff. They've all gone bought this analyzer. They've all built the same test that I have. They put them in their design cycle. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm like, go ahead and use me as free marketing.
Sure.
I don't get anything out of it, but it's my pleasure to promote things that are well engineered. Yeah. So if I give you a recommendation and you can go put in your website in Japan and China that is recommended by SR, more power to you. Yeah. So they have, and traditionally when I worked with consumer electronics companies, Chinese companies have basically what I would call zero religion. Compared to a company like Sony that is so proud of everything they've done for 50 years, who don't ever want to hear you have something new and better. Chinese is like, no, have a lot of respect for Americans, Western companies, and you go right in and out. And then Koreans are mostly in the middle, but the Japanese are very, very hard. So the classic Japanese company, does Yamaha come to me? No. When I found a problem with their, Pioneer, I found a major problem with the thing. Brand new machine I bought for myself, send it back to them, black hole. So they don't want to respond to me, let alone send me this stuff. So it varies. I'd say for the most part, most of this industry has heard about me now. They're worried about me that I'm going to test some of their product, but they don't reach out to me.
So do you think
only a small portion reaches out to me?
Do you think that will, so do you think that
I think it's changing.
Do you think that, do you think that, slowly but surely the people who are in the know are starting to realize, okay,
because the customers are asking for it.
We need to pay attention to this because customers are asking
customers are going saying, where are the measurements? Why aren't you not sending one to ASR?
That's funny that you say that, because I'm in the market for an amplifier, for example, right? And I bought a DAC. I bought the Saucons, I don't know how to say it, Saucon cause. Saucon SGD1, right? Really nice DAC. I mean, really nice DAC. It measures super well. It sounds like nothing, which is exactly
what you want it to be.
It sounds like nothing, which is exactly how it should. And I have, but when I went to go buy a new amplifier, I'm holding off. Because I'm holding off until I want to buy one of the Purify models. But I'm holding off until I read a review of this particular one. So that's an example of having an input. Now, I've read someone's criticism on a forum that said these people, they use stronger words than these people. These people, these idiots or whatever won't go buy something until this guy reviews it. And I thought to myself, why is that a bad?
That is a bad thing.
Why is that a negative? The logic that person is using doesn't make a lot of sense. Why is that a negative thing? Wouldn't you want to know that your product is right? You wouldn't go buy. No one goes and buys a McLaren F1 if it didn't perform on the track.
Exactly.
You wouldn't go buy a McLaren F1 just sitting on the shelf and say if it's good. You know what I mean? We wouldn't do that. You'd only buy a McLaren F1 if it was a Formula One tested machine. That goes. You know what I mean?
Even I get burned when I buy things that I haven't measured. Like a new DAC chip comes out, 9038 from ESS came out. People are like, please get it. So I go spend $300 buy this Chinese DAC, and I get it, and it's crap. I'm like, shoot, now I got stuck with it. I don't want to buy anything anymore. You guys keep talking me. So even for me, it's tough just looking at the tea leaves of the specs and what these guys give you, whether it's going to be good or not going to be good until it gets measured. So people ask me, what do you recommend for this and that? I said, only things I recommend are the stuff I've measured. You ask me about something else, I can't tell you till I measure it, because the identical ingredients can make a lousy dish. People put them together wrong. I don't care what chip it has, what design it has, what it has. You got to measure the combination as shipped. And by the way, there are other things other than audio performance. Is safety. I do a lot of teardowns. Some of them are horrific mistakes. I look at this stuff and it just does not pass the safety.
What's one of the big things? Grounding.
So the moment you have mains input coming in, the gain changes. So when the thing has an external adapter, then that adapter is CE certified or UL and FCC certified, then you're in good shape, because what comes out of it is low voltage. Then it goes into the unit. So DACs and things like that, most of them are fine. But the moment you buy an amplifier or DAC or something where that power supply has been pulled in, which is good to do because you have less clutter, and now it's all inside and it can be optimized. Now the safety becomes paramount. Major companies like Sony and others will go through certification of third-party labs. They have design engineers that this is all they do. When I managed hardware, I had guys whose only job was safety of these things. And they would work with UL. We would fail UL multiple tests. They would subject it high voltage through every port, every wire, and the thing would blow up. We'd have to revise the thing. But when you get a DIYer who buys a module from IPEX and sticks this other power supply in there, runs all of his own wiring, high voltage wiring going right on top of the signal line.
I see. Yeah.
You know, I've had people that, I mean, there's some of them I look at, I'm like, my God, and this is something you're going to leave on all the time when you're not around. I mean, what could happen? Now, people say, I haven't heard any of these blow up. I'm like, yes, the safety standards are, because 1 in a million is too many if it blows up your house. We don't, you die, right? You pour some water on top of this amp, liquid goes in there, shorts out the chassis, and you touch it, and you get shocked.
You're getting electrocuted.
I don't care if the odds of that in 1 in a million. It costs 0 to make it no risk. Now, I grant them that getting UL certification is expensive, so you're not going to do the certification, but at least pay attention to the circuit thing.
Use the same design philosophies, even if you're, for example, the similar thing to that is a THX certification. There's plenty of amplifiers that perform to the THX spec that are not THX certified.
Right.
So at least that,
I mean, simple things where these are stuff when you manage hardware development. If you don't, you don't know. Anodized aluminum, black, is not a conductor. So you take a ground wire, even if you connect it to that, it does not go to the chassis.
Right.
You've got to sand off that little area, then screw it in. If you're a DIY guy, you just wire the thing. Even if you follow having a ground, you could do it wrong because you've never seen this before. You didn't work for a proper company that did this stuff. So I do a lot of these things. Quality of the capacitors and components, electrolytic capacitors especially, they're expensive. They go cheap, they go no name. And where they place them, whether they put them close to heat sources that can dry them out. So I do it look-see, bring in my hardware design background and managing these things. And when I do teardowns, now I don't always do teardowns because some people don't want me to do it, or manufacturers don't want people to see what's inside. But I do them enough, and then teach people so you can go and ask, can I see a picture inside? And let me take a look at it. And if you have choice of two models, get the one that has the certification.
The Chinese are pumping out a lot of good products. Is there any reliability issues that you're concerned about? A lot of these companies, Topping, and a lot of these companies are producing great technical products, but we don't know yet. The jury's still out, I think, with reliability. And me, for one, I have the Suncones, right? They're a new company, and I don't turn the thing off. I don't even think there's a power. I don't think there's a power button. Well, there's no power button on the front. It's only on the back. And so, which tells me they kind of designed it not to be turned on, not to be turned off. There's not even a power button on the remote. There's not even a power button on the remote control. I think. I don't think there is.
They always stay on internal.
So I think they've designed it to be on all the time. So, but have they made sure the subsystems support that? In your experience?
It's a complicated question, complicated answer, because you can't generalize, right? On one hand, Chinese companies are building just about everything we use, right? So these factories are producing, next minute they'd be producing an Apple phone, and then in another shift they may be producing this PC board for this little company. So surface mount devices have, these are tiny little component cells sit on top, a very reliable technology. That said, can these things blow up? Yes. Can they blow up other things downstream? Yes. But is it just Chinese that do it? No. You can get brand name American companies. I had an American company, DAC, that shorted out internally, hooked up to this amplifier, and blew the speaker that was hooked up to my amplifier to pieces when it shorted out. Wow. So before the protection circuit could kick in my amplifier, it did that. The thing was gone. And I opened that American company. I can see all the charged circuits in there. And their friends, actually, a company. I called them. They wouldn't believe it. They didn't even want to listen. I'm like, it's impossible. I'm like, what do you mean impossible? I'm looking at the charged circuit board. Hey, you get it. It was a DAC. You think it's a low-power device, can't do it. So reliability is a complicated thing. That said, I've opened some DIY stuff. They are just horrific in there. There was a DAC that I opened. Guy in UK designed it. There was no design. It's just hand soldered this stuff. Just a disaster.
Stuffing stuff in a box.
Had lithium batteries in it where these things can explode in there and have thermal runaways. So do I worry about a $99 DAC going bad? No. I'll check it, get another one if it goes bad. Do I worry about stuff blowing up? I do worry about stuff blowing up. So what should people look for then if they're buying these Chinese DACs and these Chinese products like this? What is it? UL? Is it CE? There's UL, there's CE, there's CE as well, right? Right. So there's multiple standards. So in US, 2 standards are mandated. Well, actually, one of them is FCC, which is about radiation. How much, and these things have a lot of digital circuits and other things that can actually radiate noise. In the old days, they worried about interfering with your AM radio and TV, which doesn't happen anymore because we don't use those things anymore. But a lot of audiophiles care about noise, If you care about noise, you better have this FCC certification. FCC, though, doesn't care about safety. So for UL, for US, we use UL, which is Underwriters Laboratory.
Which is the safety portion of it.
Yeah, and you go there and get the certification. Both of these are expensive, pain in the neck, so only big companies do it.
I see.
In Canada, they have CSA standard, and that is similar to our UL. So if you see for safety, then UL is good, CSA is good. CE is for European Union. Unfortunately, it's fully self-certified. Means you can put a sticker on the back saying I'm CE and ship. And there is no testing required whatsoever. It's a trust system. So I think a lot of people putting CE stickers on them, or no CE stickers. Tons of stuff comes from Europe, has no little company ship this stuff. There is no CE. And it's illegal to export to EU without CE. Customs supposed to stop it over there, but they don't. So tons of these companies send stuff. So for anything as mains powered, look for UL, CSA, or CE marking, knowing that the CE mark can be fictitious. But if it's a brand name company, then it means everything. Denon, NAD, Sony, Samsung, Harman, all of those things are reliable.
Oh, the big ones.
Brand.
Yeah.
When it's a little company, now Topping, fully certified with third party, including their CE certification.
Right.
Not only do they run the analyzer stuff for the audio performance, they also take all this here, and all the certificates are on their website.
So you know, is Topping also an OEM for other
No.
manufacturers, or do they only make stuff for Topping?
Every time I've seen things that look similar to them, I want to ask. They said no, it's not theirs. People try to copy them.
I see.
So there's some
they only make
companies that try
Topping
to go.
stuff.
As far as I know, they don't do OEMs.
I see. They don't design for Macintosh or anything like that.
No. I think they're a small company. A lot of people think I know a lot about Topping. I only know one person there that is my contact. I actually don't know how many employees they have, what they do, but my impression is a small company.
Okay.
I would say maybe 5 or 10 companies building this set of products.
They're just guys who like audio, and they have good engineers.
Good engineers
like
that care
SMSL.
about verifying the design with an analyzer.
Yeah.
SMSL initially wasn't as good as Topping because
They were not
measuring.
but they've come on
but
strong.
Now they're caught up.
They've come on strong.
Good.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of these brands now out there that all have started a race to see who can get the best numbers.
Well, here's the next question. You have this thing where I've read in some reviews where they've taken the input or the output buffers off because to make the measurements work well.
Yeah.
You know what that's about? Talk to us about that. What's that about? They've done something to make the measurements right, but that's a disservice to us
potentially.
To some degree.
I'm unhappy about that. Yep, I'm unhappy about it. And you could argue I haven't done enough about it because I tend to not measure them, because as good as this analyzer is, it can't stock measure those things. Okay. So there are two games being played in two different classes of devices. Normally, you want your source devices to have very low impedance, and you want your destination device to have very high impedance.
So
when that happens, so then when this impedance is high, this one's very low, there's no losses, voltage loss between this and this. All the signal translates to this one and picks it up and goes there. Turns out if you have resistors that are big, every resistor generates noise. And the larger the resistor, the more noise it generates. So it's advantageous on the input of a preamp to try to shrink this resistance to be a lower number. Okay? Inversely, on the DAC, there is a buffer stage that reduces the impedance. But if you take it out, you still get sound, impedance goes up, and the noise goes down a little bit. When these guys are fighting over that 1 or 2 dB at the end of the rainbow on my measurements, 120 to 122 dB, that last 2 dB requires this game to be played to get to the top of that chart. Even though we've gone past the threshold of transparency at 115, these guys just created this Olympic race between themselves and see who can get there. By doing that, they've now created some compatibility issue in that the output of this DAC now, when it puts out 2 volts, by the time it gets here, maybe at 1.5 volts. Now, this device may not care. You may be able to crank up the gain some more. You may play. or it may care. There's been 1 or 2 cases where if you mix this company's preamp with this other company's DAC, you may not get maximum volume.
But you know,
your headphones.
You know, the funny thing is that I have the Celcons, right, the SG-D1, and I also have the Allo Volt Plus.
Yeah, yeah.
As a stand-in amplifier until I can buy the purified unit or the benchmark.
Yeah.
But I noticed that I have to turn the Celcons up, a ton on the volume control just to get, the 80, 85 decibels out of it. Much more than my previous amplifier, which was the 502, the 502 MP.
That's actually a different problem. The audio industry has never standardized on what the gain of an amplifier should be, a power amplifier. There's no number. So it could be 10 dB, 15 dB, 20 dB, 30 dB. Okay. They've never decided on a number.
It seems like between 20 and 30 is about the kind of the
typical range.
20 to 30.
And THX has, for THX certification, you need to have 29 dB.
29, yeah.
So I use 29, but their amplifiers are at 25, 24. And a few dB here makes a huge difference. You may divide the output level by half. So it's a messed up world when it comes to amplifiers.
Okay, so that's what's going on with mine.
That's what is going on. So that now, if you have lower gain in a power amplifier, it improves its noise performance. So sometimes the gain is lowered to get better measurements.
That's what the passive stuff does.
Yeah, so it pays to get a source DAC that has higher output. So Benchmark makes DACs that can go up to 12 volts, RME and others make up 12, 15, some of them up to 20 volts you can get. So Pro products have a lot of outputs in their DACs, and you can pair them with a low gain amplifier and get better performance. So that Purify amplifier module by itself has a very low gain, I think 10 or 12 dB. So people put a buffer in front of it, but if you have a high output DAC, you can avoid having that buffer and get better performance.
I see. So I think the standard that purifies the Hypex stock filter, but it's a power supply. Isn't it? It's like a power supply filter all in one kind of module that powers that.
So the Hypex just built an amp, and for the reference design, Purify built just the amp, and for power supply, they just use the Hypex power
supply, the 1200
off the shelf. Yeah, but you can put anything in there. But the input of that amplifier in a reference design, they took another Hypex module, which is a buffer stage. But every OEM gets to choose what buffer they use. Many of them are designed their own, and some of them don't keep up with the performance of the main unit. What I'm saying is that you can actually bypass that and not need that preamp if you have a DAC that can output 10 or 12 volts.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying.
So if you get a benchmark DAC or RME, your RME actually may put out a lot of voltage. Babyface actually may be superior in that regard.
Well, the funny thing is that's on my that's my sound card.
Sound card for the
that's where my sound card. I mean, it's completely overkill, to be honest with you, just for as a volume control. But let me ask this another question. So, do you think audiophiles have lost credibility in high-end audio to the younger generations? Because if you listen to people like Dr. Waldrip from AIX Records, he's a very big proponent of, we've been kind of lying to people about what is high resolution. People can't tell the difference between a very well recorded CD and a 2496 recording. It sounds just like a master, or maybe even better than a master. But to try to sell people 24, 192, DSD and all these shenanigans, we're really shooting ourselves in the foot. Audio engineers don't respect us, because do you see where I'm going here? So do you think that audiophiles have lost that credibility? And more importantly, if you do, how can they regain that credibility in the space?
Let me first give you a technical answer. Production for audio is done at high sample rate and high bit depth. So they almost always use 24-bit, and the sample rate is probably most likely 96 kilohertz and higher. They don't start with 16-bit 44.1 and capture all the sound that way and mix it, because by the time you mix and layer and add effects and everything, you're way below 16.
Yeah, you're dropping resolution.
There are a few crazies that do it with 16, but let's agree that everything, and the ADCs have been available at 24-bit for 20 years or more.
Yeah.
So that world moved on, and they moved on to higher sample rates, because then there can also be artifacts. If you keep a sample rate too low and apply certain nonlinear effects, they can generate aliasing problems. So nobody really does, low sample rate, low bit rate, and hard disk and SSDs are so cheap these days that all production is done that way. Now for delivery, when it used to be CD, they had to bring it down to 16 and 44.1. It seems like if you have 24-bit audio that's high resolution, and you want to go to 16, that you just take out the 8 and throw it away, and the upper 16 would be the right data. As soon as you do that, actually you generate tons of distortion. It is non-intuitive, but it creates this stair-step thing where values that used to gradually change with these low-order 8 bits, now they're jumping from one to the other, and that little square wave edge is actually a pretty bad distortion.
So you have to, and that's audible.
It can't be audible. Yeah, it has harshness.
If it's at a high enough level.
Right. So the solution for that is actually called dither, which is random noise of special type. You apply to 24-bit sample. When you do that and convert, then you preserve, but then you don't generate distortion, but you actually lose another 3 dB of noise floor. So you add noise, and the noise is there. So you lose even 16 bits dynamic range. You actually go from 96 down to 93.
Now, is that resolution or is that dynamic range that you're losing?
So dynamic range, so bit depth is what we're talking about.
Okay.
So the problem is that it's an optional step, and there are different kinds of noises you can add, and there are people who produce music understand signal processing who don't dither.
I see.
There are some that dither using God knows what algorithm. So park that. The next one is sample rate. So they've done it at 96 kilohertz. Now you want to go to 44.1, right? You got to do a sample rate conversion. There are different mathematical algorithms for this. The most perfect theoretical one converts it to 44.1 and doesn't add any other artifacts to it. You just lose the high frequencies that you can't hear anyway. But if it's not done right, you can get some peaking. So high frequencies can be exaggerated a little bit, or they can be rolled off a little bit. Now, for CD, you had no choice. You had to get 16-bit, and you had to get 44.1, so you do the conversion, right?
Yeah.
My point of view is, if I don't have a CD anymore, which I don't use, I either stream or I buy digital content. Why are you dumbing it down to 16? Where did 16 come from anymore? Where did 44.1 come from anymore?
I see.
I'm not interested in either. I have gigabit Ethernet to my ISP. Go ahead and give me the 24-bit 96. And when I buy it from these independent labels that do their own recordings, they have it in both, and it's the same price. 44.1 is the same price, 96. Or if it's $1 more, I paid $1 more and get the other one.
Can you hear the difference between 1644 and 2496?
So Mark actually worked with somebody else years ago and put out a public test of 24-bit versus 16 and 44.1, and I passed those tests. I passed them blind, double-blind APX tests. And that wasn't because I thought one was better than the other. I simply could distinguish the two, mostly because I think it's either because of dithering that was used or the roll-off of the sampling. Now, I know hardly anybody in the world could pass those tests. So as a practical matter, what you said is true. But from Amir's point of view, which gets me in trouble with my objectivism on a forum, I said, whatever you produce to that, give it to me at that rate. If I want 44.116, I'll make it myself.
I see. So,
I don't need you to.
So you're saying that you're contending that you can tell the difference in 24 to 96 and 1644 on very. I'm gonna throw something extra in there on a very good recording, because just because it says 2496 on the label doesn't mean that it's actually a well-recorded 2496.
You actually go into a different world in that I've done spectrum analysis of high frequency, high music. There's tons of garbage in ultrasonics. There are tones at 40, 50 kilohertz that we
It's
can't
junk.
hear. They just sit it. It's junk. It's
Yeah.
the alarm system was generating
Yeah.
ultrasonic, and the
Right.
microphone picked it up and recorded it. There's the scan rate of the monitor bled into their electronics recorder. So I'm not telling you that the high-res music is good. Most of it, what comes out from labels and others, is junk.
Yeah,
and there's nothing good up there. I'm just saying, when you convert it, though, the conversion can add its own noise and distortion.
Okay.
It's very, very slight. And if I spend a lot of time doing A/B tests, I may be able to tell difference. But I'm saying it's academic. I don't need you to dumb it down for me, Mr. Label.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You have the files. I can download them in 5 minutes.
Give me the real deal.
Give me the bit. Don't argue with me. I'm not here for the argument. I don't care. The physical cost is no longer an issue. Leave me alone.
So is there, do you now, so I'll this will be one of the last questions.
Sure.
And then we'll wrap up. But this is one of the questions that we get all the time is, I'm streaming audio.
Yeah.
Does streaming audio sound better or worse than, let's say, CD or locally stored audio from like an SSD? And then going one further, is wireless streaming audio because any different? Here at home,
sure,
I have my DAC is connected to my Mac Mini. My Mac Mini is wirelessly connected to my network.
Sure.
To me, digital transmission has been a solved problem for 50 years. Since it's been around, it's a solved problem. But audiophiles can't get off of the idea that it's wireless. It must be it must be less somehow. It must be. What's your take on that?
If the source is, let's say, it's an image of the CD, so the source itself is not different. If you're talking Spotify, it's MP3 or whatever, that obviously has got losses in it. If you're starting with a lossless, let's say it's your home server, as long as you get no dropouts, wireless works just as well as wired.
Okay.
And the only thing Wi-Fi can do is that it can get interference and you may lose the data.
But that's not a distortion. Happens. But that's not but that won't be.
No, it'll just
that won't be a distortion. Right. That will be
a pause.
Right. That will be like your HD TV getting a signal and it dropping off, turning black the screen, and then coming back on. Not correct.
Although
not
your
a distortion
HDTV. Yeah, the HDTV actually has error mitigation. You get pixelation, so don't go there.
That's true. That's true.
Videos
that's a bad example.
But
that's a bad example.
A good attempt, but technically it makes things complicated. But for audio, the protocols used for home streaming is reliable and retransmits. And basically, if you can't get the data in time, though, because it's a real-time process, it asks for it. If it doesn't come back, in time, it has to pause, and you get dropouts. So all of a sudden, your music stops playing.
I see. There's no distortion. There's no distortion. There's no distortion at all because it's wireless. Right. So the next question then is, does a 24 well recorded CD locally, well recorded CD on your local hard drive sound any different than later? Let's say that same file streamed wirelessly through Qobuz or Tidal.
That's a complicated thing because you would think the record labels are competent companies, but they're totally incompetent. When you go to them as Joe distributor like Tidal, and you say, "Can I have your catalog? Can I have this album?"
Yeah.
Somebody goes in the back and gets you a file. There's no guarantee that file is the same file that was used to make the CD. It could be better. It could be worse. It could be a different mastering. Yeah. They are totally ad hoc. They go, older music is different than newer music, and these Tidal deals with the 10,000 independent labels too, in addition to the majors. And every independent label is different.
Totally different.
There may be just two guys in a garage that made that music.
Spots,
When you call them, they may not even have the right master. For that reason, some people have gotten, there was a Yes album that HD Tracks got that was actually had MP3 compression artifacts in it. You could easily see the MP3 truncate. That it came back actually as high res.
Yeah, right.
It wasn't even CD, it was MP3. So of course the people did the mastering, hemmed and hawed, say it wasn't them. But I have a friend over here, Bruce Brown Studios. He actually does a ton of mastering for studios. He's actually found cases where he did the mastering, gave it to the label to do the high res distribution, and then he downloaded what they distributed and it didn't match.
So they
the
did
file
something
that he gave them, somebody once stepped on or changed, and it doesn't match with him. So he throws his hand up in the air and say, "I don't know what to do."
Yeah.
They paid me to digitize his tapes and stuff, and I did them, but then they still didn't publish them right. So There's no guarantee that the title, Cobas, master is the same as a CD.
Okay.
That's the net of it. Most of the time it is, but not in every case. So
if they're, let's say they are the same, would there be? Let's say they are the same.
Then there's no difference whatsoever.
Yeah.
No
so
difference whatsoever.
your locally stored stuff is going to sound just the same as when it comes to Cobas. If they're, if they're the same thing.
Yep. I listen to title all the time, including the music that I've ripped. Too lazy to get them into my server. I just stream them.
Me too.
And it's identical. There's no difference.
Yeah, I have a server. It sits over there somewhere, and I think it's turned off.
Yeah. I mean, I've got mine, but I've moved servers, and some of my files aren't. Yeah. I'm like, hey, just as easy to just get the idle version of it. I'm not going to switch.
Yeah, I think I have about 2 terabytes of music, and I can't be bothered anymore to actually pull it up. It's just much easier to go on my tablet and search it on Tidal, and it's bang, like
right there.
It's super convenient. All right. Yep. Amir, listen, I'm gonna close this down. I think we've been on the line now for going on 2 hours now.
Oh gosh.
So time flies when you're having
good
fun. Chat.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna close down here. I want to thank you for sticking with us. Where can people find you, know about you? Tell people about
just AudioScienceReview.com, one word. You can also Google for ASR forum, and that'll also get you there. Or just type Audio Science Review in Google, and you'll get there. Once you're there, you'll see the reviews, and you'll see my posts everywhere, and you can start a message with me and talk to me there, and everything you need is there. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. Actually, I'm on Facebook, but I hardly use it. So don't look for me anywhere else.
Gotcha. Okay. So Audio Science Review. Okay.
Audio Science Review. Yep.
Gotcha. All right. So as we go forward, we might ask you to come back to maybe provide some color to some things if we have some various topics going forward.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me, and good luck with the channel.
I'll put so real quick here. I'll put a link in the description to the ASR forum.
That's great.
If you're a viewer here and you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe, like the channel, comment down below. I engage with all of you if there's civil comments, and if you have a question for Amir, I can see if Amir can might be able to I'll fire the question off to Amir and see if he can get an answer for us. But other than that, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it, Amir. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
See you later. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.